Welcome to week 25 of Valor Discipleship. This week, the title is Tell His Story Through Our Testimony. So we're going to take time this week to begin to ponder His story in our lives, His faithfulness in our lives. Now, up to this point, there's been so much transformation done. All the way through week 24, you've been allowing God to truly transform you. You've been using the 9 tools. You've been spending time with Him. You've been serving others. You've been growing your prayer life and your time in the Word. You've been meditating and memorizing God's Word. So much transformation is done in your life. That this is a turning point that we begin to use that transformation and truly go and make disciples. The first step in that is knowing your testimony, writing your testimony, and having the boldness to share your testimony. So this week, we're going to talk a lot about His story in our lives. Ultimately, we want to point people to Jesus. We want them to know Him. We want them to know about Him, His mighty power, His transforming power in their lives. And we do that by showing His transforming power in our lives. People may not know God or they may not understand God, but they know us, and we have the ability to be used to point people to Jesus through our story. That's our testimony. You know, there's a couple of verses in your curriculum in week 25. One of them is Revelations 12, where it talks about that they will know Him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. So we are so thankful that we can share the gospel, we can share salvation, so people can come into a relationship with God and that they can know that relationship through salvation. But we also know that we can use the way He's worked in our lives, our testimony, our explanation of God to help point people to Jesus. They will know God because we know God and we share our story. So your story is important. His story in your life is the most important thing. So you're going to take some time this week and you're going to spend some time with the Lord, and you're going to just allow Him to help you remember points in your life that He really, really was there. Maybe it was points before you knew Him, before you understood Him, but He has always been there. I want you to think of it like a timeline, a giant timeline where you put at the beginning of the timeline the day of your birth. You have events up to the point where you are now. That's a piece of your timeline. And then the end of the timeline is your death. And so God has His fingerprint all the way through your life. The ways you've seen Him, the way He's going to show you, the way He's working now, and the way He's going to work in the future. Those are all part of your story. So let me give you an example. If I put birth, the day I was born, all right, I didn't know God yet, but He knew me. He already had a plan for me. And so I see that he had begun working even then. But I think of significant times. I think of that Sunday school teacher that I had. Her name was Gladys, and she just loved me. I remember that was the first recollection that I have of really knowing and understanding God. Now, it was an elementary understanding. I was young, but there was something about Gladys. There was something about the way she shared God's love with me, about the way she showed me stories in the Bible, that I began to understand that there really was a God and that I could have a relationship with Him. I remember when I went forward, I walked forward in church service and I said, yes, I want that salvation that you're talking about. Again, I was young. I'm not sure I fully understood, but I remember that time. I remember the prompting in my heart, that feeling that I had that made me want to walk forward and say yes to Jesus. I remember where I was standing in my college dorm when I went off to college and for the first time realized this was my journey. This wasn't my parents' journey. This wasn't the reputation I had back home, but this was my decision whether I was all in or not all in with Jesus. And so I remember pondering. I remember where I was, that God brought this thought to my mind that said, I know I have to be all in or all out. This walking both sides of the fence just isn't going to work. So I pondered that for weeks, and I looked at my friends that I had that I loved being with. We had so much fun together, and I knew that going down that path with them was going to be a lot of fun, but it was not what God had for me. I knew it would change the trajectory of my life. But I also had people in my life who I loved that were pointing me to Jesus, that were showing me the way God would have me live my life. And I just wasn't sure. I just didn't know. I knew I had to make a decision though. So I pondered that. And I remember the day that I said, yes, I'm all in for Jesus. I know that I may miss out on some things. My life, I have no idea what my life is going to look like, but God has a plan and I'm all in to follow him. Haven't looked back from that point when I was 19 years old, but it's definitely a significant point in my timeline when God stopped me and said, choose this day who you will serve. I'm so glad that I did. Have I been perfect? Absolutely not. Have I taken some wrong turns? Absolutely. But I do remember that point. I remember the point where I was sitting as I was volunteering at the Dream Center in Arizona when God said, I want you to quit your job and go into full-time ministry. So many doubts about that. I had no idea what that looked like. I just didn't know. It just looked like such an unknown future, but I knew in my heart that's what God was telling me to do. In the next several weeks and months, I made the decision and I said yes, that I would quit my job and go into full-time ministry. That's a significant time on my timeline. I see God's fingerprint in my life very clearly. I see him in my life today. And because of that, because of all those ways that I reflect and see his fingerprint in my life, then I know that he is faithful and he's going to be with me to carry me on for the next thing that he has for me. And so you're going to do the same. I want you to ponder a timeline. Think about your life. Think about significant times where you saw the hand of God in your life. Maybe it was a very difficult time that you at the time didn't know how you were going to survive. You didn't know how you were going to get through that time. But looking back, you see God's hand in that. Maybe you didn't even know him yet, but you look back and you see where he was there with you all along. It's so important that we allow God to show us where he's been in our lives. We write that testimony out so that others can see that he is faithful, that he is there for them as well. And for those that we talk to that don't know Jesus, that they will want a relationship through Jesus and they will want to follow his plan for their lives. Now, this week in your homework, you're going to find that you're going to answer a series of questions. The questions are going to be about past, present, and future. Just answer those questions this week. Begin to just ponder your life. This is really a thinking and a processing week. Next week, you're going to come together and you're going to share the answers to those questions. And then week 26, you're going to write out your testimony. But you don't have to do that this week. I just want to really encourage you to look at the questions in your homework, answer them honestly, allow God to just begin to process things in your life because he has something amazing for you. He's going to use you and your story in an amazing way. His story is going to come through loud and clear as he helps you develop your story. So I'm excited for you to be able to share that story and excited for the process that you will take in getting to that end results. So have a great week, and I cannot wait to hear about how God has told his story through you.